Imagine waking up in a town where the air outside your window is turned yellow. You step outside, but you cannot see the house across the street. Your eyes begin to burn. Your throat feels tight. Every breath tastes like metal and smoke. At first, people think it is just another dirty day in an industrial town. But then the coughing does not stop. Doctors start receiving calls from every corner of the town. Firefighters begin carrying oxygen tanks from house to house. Ambulances cannot see the roads. Families are trapped inside their homes. And then people start dying. This was not a war zone. This was not a chemical attack. This was Donora, Pennsylvania, in October 1948. For 5 days, an entire American town was trapped under a poisonous cloud. By the time the air cleared, 20 people were dead, thousands were sick, and America was forced to face a truth it had ignored for decades. The air people were breathing was killing them. This is the story of the deadly 1948 smog disaster America tried to forget. Donora was not an unusual town for its time. It was a working town. A mill town. A place built around steel, zinc, smoke, and survival. The factories gave people jobs. They gave families money. They gave the town its reason to exist. But they also filled the air with poison. For years, people in Donora lived under a dirty sky. Smoke came from the steel mill. Chemicals came from the zinc plant. Dust settled on houses, cars, windows, clothes, and skin. The air burned people's throats, but most people accepted it. Because in Donora, smoke meant work. And work meant food on the table. The town sat in a narrow valley along the Monongahela River, about 30 miles from Pittsburgh. It was surrounded by steep hills. This geography mattered more than anyone understood at the time. Donora was almost like a bowl. When smoke entered the air, it did not always leave quickly. The hills helped trap it close to the town. That was dangerous. But for decades, people treated it as normal. By the 1940s, Donora had become heavily industrial. The zinc works and steel operations ran day and night. Their smokestacks released sulfur dioxide, metal dust, and other toxic chemicals into the air. People knew the air was bad. Farmers nearby had complained for years. Some had even taken legal action because pollution damaged crops, animals, and land. But nothing really changed. The companies paid small settlements. The plants kept running. The town kept breathing the same air. Then came the last week of October 1948. A weather system moved into the valley. The winds slowed down. The air became still. And then something called a temperature inversion formed above Donora. Normally, warm air near the ground rises and carries pollution upward. But during an inversion, a layer of warm air sits above cooler air and traps it below. It is like putting a lid over the town. And Donora was already sitting inside a valley. So when the factories released smoke and chemicals, they had nowhere to go. The poison stayed close to the ground. At first, the smog looked like a heavy fog. People had seen dirty air before, so many did not panic. They went to work. Children went to school. The factories kept operating. But the fog did not lift. By the second day, visibility had become worse. Streets looked strange and unfamiliar. Buildings disappeared into the haze. People walking outside had to move slowly because they could barely see ahead of them. The air became sharp. It burned the eyes. It scratched the throat. It made breathing painful. Still, the town tried to continue as normal. That is one of the most disturbing parts of the story. Disaster did not arrive like an explosion. It arrived slowly, quietly, breath by breath. By Friday, the smog had become something more frightening. It was no longer just dirty air. It felt heavy. People could taste chemicals. Workers came home short of breath. Elderly residents and people with heart or lung problems started struggling badly. Doctors began getting more and more calls. People were coughing. People had chest pain. People could not breathe. There were only a few doctors in town, and they were quickly overwhelmed. They moved from house to house, treating patients wherever they could. Firefighters also became emergency responders. They carried oxygen tanks through streets where headlights could barely cut through the smog. In some places, visibility was so low that driving became almost impossible. Firefighters and doctors had to find homes through a poisonous fog, help one patient, then leave for the next one. They did not have enough oxygen for everyone. They did not have enough time. They did not have a modern emergency system. And all the while, the factories continued running. The company did not immediately shut everything down. The official response was slow. The pollution kept pouring into air that was already trapped. By Saturday morning, the situation became deadly. The first confirmed death came in the early hours. Then more people died. By the end of the disaster, 20 people were confirmed dead. Thousands more became sick. Some reports later connected additional deaths in the following weeks to the exposure. Almost half the town had been affected. Families watched relatives struggle for breath inside their own homes. Doctors worked without rest. Funeral homes filled. The town was living through an environmental disaster before America even had the language to fully describe one. Then, finally, rain came. The rain helped break the inversion. The smog began to lift. Fresh air returned to the valley. But the damage had already been done. For 5 days, Donora had been trapped under a toxic cloud created by industry, geography, weather, and years of ignored warnings. After the disaster, the question should have been simple. Who was responsible? But the answer became complicated. The company blamed the weather. It argued that the smog was caused by unusual atmospheric conditions, not by one single source. Others pointed to home furnaces, cars, river traffic, and the valley itself. But people in Donora knew what they had been breathing for years. The problem was not just one bad week of weather. The problem was decades of pollution treated as normal. Lawsuits followed, but the company did not admit wrongdoing. Many families received very little. Some people were angry, but others stayed quiet because their jobs depended on the same industry they wanted to blame. That is what made Donora so tragic. The mills gave people life. And then the air from those mills helped take it away. The disaster changed America, but slowly. Investigators studied what happened. Donora became one of the first major environmental health disasters in the United States to receive national attention. It helped push the country toward air pollution control and eventually stronger clean air laws. Years later, the Clean Air Act would change the way America regulated pollution. Today, Donora is remembered as one of the places where the fight for clean air truly began. But that progress came at a terrible cost. 20 people died in 5 days. Thousands became sick. A whole town learned that dirty air was not just uncomfortable. It was not just the price of jobs. It was not just smoke in the sky. It was a silent killer. And the most haunting part is that people already knew the air was bad. They just did not know it could kill them. Donora's story is not only about one town in 1948. It is about every place where people are told to accept danger because it brings money. It is about what happens when industry becomes too powerful to question. It is about pollution that is visible every day, but ignored until bodies start falling. For decades, America looked at towns like Donora and saw progress. Factories, jobs, smoke, growth. But in October 1948, Donora forced America to see something else. The cost. The cost of ignoring warnings. The cost of letting companies police themselves. The cost of treating clean air like a luxury instead of a right. And that is why this disaster still matters. Because the most dangerous disasters are not always the ones that happen suddenly. Sometimes, they build slowly. In the air. In the lungs. In the silence. Until one day, a town wakes up and realizes that the thing keeping it alive has also been poisoning it for years. This was the 1948 Donora Smog Disaster. The deadly fog America tried to forget.